Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where we transform ancient wisdom into practical guidance for modern life. I'm here to help you discover how the profound insights of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus can revolutionize your daily experience and build the character you've always wanted to develop. Today, we're diving deep into what the Stoics considered the most essential virtue of all: courage. But here's what might surprise you. This isn't about jumping out of airplanes or charging into battle. The courage we're exploring is far more fundamental and, frankly, more challenging than those dramatic moments we typically associate with bravery. Think about your typical Tuesday morning. You're checking emails before your first meeting, and you discover a message that makes your stomach drop. Maybe it's criticism from a colleague that feels unfair, or news about a project that's going sideways, or simply another demand on your already stretched schedule. In that moment, you face a choice that defines who you are. Do you respond with courage or retreat into the comfortable patterns of avoidance and fear? This is where real courage lives, not in the grand gestures that make headlines, but in the countless small decisions that shape our character every single day. The Stoics understood something profound about human nature. Courage isn't just one virtue among many. It's the foundation that makes all other virtues possible. Without courage, wisdom remains locked in our minds, never translated into action. Without courage, justice becomes merely a nice idea we never actually practice. Without courage, self-discipline crumbles the moment we face real temptation or pressure. The ancient Stoic philosophers lived through plagues, wars, exile, and persecution, yet they discovered something remarkable. The external circumstances of life matter far less than our internal response to them. They learned that courage could be cultivated like a muscle, strengthened through daily practice until it becomes our natural response to life's challenges. But here's the part that changes everything: courage isn't about being fearless. Even Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, wrote extensively about his fears and doubts in his personal journal, which we now know as Meditations. Courage is about feeling the fear, acknowledging the uncertainty, and then choosing to act according to your principles anyway. Over the next several sections, we're going to explore 7 specific ways to build unshakable courage into your daily routine. You'll learn how to make decisions that align with your deepest values, even when the pressure to conform feels overwhelming. You'll discover how to recognize the heroic opportunities hiding in your ordinary Tuesday morning, and how to develop the inner strength to stand alone when necessary, trusting that your principled action will eventually inspire others to join you. Most importantly, you'll understand why the Stoics believed that courage isn't just about improving your own life. It's about becoming the kind of person who makes the world better simply by existing in it with integrity and fearless commitment to what's right. 1. Choose courage over fear in every daily decision. You're standing in the elevator at your office building, heading up to the 15th floor for what you know will be a difficult team meeting. Your manager has been pushing a strategy that you believe will ultimately harm both the company and the clients you serve. You've been rehearsing what you want to say for days, but as the elevator climbs higher, that familiar knot forms in your stomach. The voice in your head starts its predictable chorus. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should just stay quiet. Maybe someone else will speak up. This moment right here in this elevator represents one of the most profound insights from ancient Stoic philosophy. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a prisoner in a Soviet gulag named Varlam Shalamov observed something that cuts to the heart of human character. He said the fundamental distinction in life isn't between good people and bad people, or between strong people and weak people. The real divide, he realized, is between cowards and non-cowards. He went further, noting that cowards are capable of the most destructive actions imaginable, precisely because they operate from a place of self-interest rather than principle. The Stoics would have understood Shalamov's insight completely. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal while leading the Roman Empire through plague and war, repeatedly emphasized that our character is revealed not in grand moments of obvious heroism, but in the daily choices we make when we think nobody is watching. He wrote, "Just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter." This seemingly simple statement contains layers of wisdom that can transform how you approach every decision in your life. Consider what happens in that elevator scenario. The fear you're experiencing isn't actually about the meeting itself. It's about the potential consequences of standing up for what you believe is right. You might worry about appearing difficult, about damaging relationships with colleagues, about being seen as someone who doesn't play well with others. These concerns feel rational and justified, but the Stoics would challenge you to examine them more deeply. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before becoming one of history's most influential philosophers, taught that we suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgments about those events. In the elevator, you're not suffering from the upcoming meeting, you're suffering from your interpretation of what might happen if you speak truthfully. This distinction is crucial because it reveals where your actual power lies. You cannot control how your manager will respond to your concerns. You cannot control whether your colleagues will support you or distance themselves from your position. You cannot control whether speaking up will advance or hinder your career in the short term. But you have complete control over one thing: whether you act according to your principles or allow fear to dictate your choices. This is where the Stoic understanding of courage becomes revolutionary. Most people think courage means not feeling afraid. The Stoics knew better. Courage means feeling the fear and choosing principle over comfort anyway. It means recognizing that cowardice isn't just personally diminishing, it's actively destructive to the communities and organizations we're part of. When you remain silent in that meeting, you're not just protecting yourself. You're enabling a decision that you believe will harm others. You're contributing to a culture where truth takes a backseat to convenience. You're modeling for everyone around you that self-interest trumps integrity. This is why Shalamov was right about cowards being dangerous, not because they're actively malicious, but because their fear-based choices create environments where harm can flourish unchecked. The Stoics developed a practical framework for moments like these. Before making any significant decision, they would ask themselves 3 questions. Is this action virtuous? Is it within my control? Will I be able to live with myself if I take this path? These questions cut through the noise of social pressure and immediate consequences to focus on what actually matters for your character development. Seneca, who navigated the treacherous political waters of ancient Rome while maintaining his philosophical principles, wrote extensively about the relationship between courage and decision-making. He observed that people who consistently choose comfort over principle gradually lose their capacity for courageous action altogether. Like muscles that atrophy from disuse, our courage diminishes when we repeatedly avoid opportunities to exercise it. But here's the encouraging truth that emerges from Stoic teaching. Every single day presents you with multiple opportunities to strengthen your courage. You don't need to wait for dramatic circumstances or life-changing moments. The elevator scenario, the difficult conversation with a family member, the decision to speak up when someone makes an inappropriate comment, the choice to admit when you've made a mistake. These ordinary moments are where character is actually built. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. Despite having access to unlimited power and luxury, he chose to focus his attention on daily character development. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I have to go to work as a human being.'" This perspective transforms every interaction into an opportunity for virtue. The practical application of this Stoic insight starts with recognition. Begin noticing the moments throughout your day when you face a choice between the easy path and the right path. Notice when you feel that familiar knot in your stomach. It's often a signal that courage is being called for. Instead of immediately seeking comfort or distraction, pause and ask yourself what principle is at stake in this moment. In essence, choosing courage over fear in daily decisions isn't about becoming a different person overnight. It's about consistently choosing to be who you already know you should be, even when that choice feels uncomfortable or risky. The Stoics believed that this practice, repeated day after day, eventually transforms not just your actions but your entire character, until courageous response becomes as natural as breathing. 2. Stay true to yourself when the world demands conformity. You're sitting across from your potential new boss in a sleek conference room, and the interview has been going well until this moment. You notice her shuffling through papers, and from your angle across the table, you can read the handwritten note she's made about you. This person seems too independent-minded to fit well with our team culture. Your heart sinks as you realize that your authentic responses to her questions, the very qualities that make you who you are being viewed as problems to be solved rather than strengths to be valued. This scenario captures one of the most challenging aspects of living with integrity in the modern world. We're constantly receiving messages, both subtle and direct, about who we should be to succeed, to be liked, to avoid conflict, to advance in our careers. The pressure to conform can feel overwhelming, and it's in these moments that we face what the ancient Stoics considered one of life's most crucial tests. Will we have the courage to remain authentically ourselves, or will we allow external pressures to reshape us into someone we don't recognize? Marcus Aurelius, writing in his private journal during the height of his power as Roman emperor, understood this struggle intimately. Despite being surrounded by courtiers and advisors who constantly tried to influence his decisions and shape his character, he wrote, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself." This insight reveals a profound truth about authentic living. The moment we start measuring ourselves primarily against others' expectations, we begin losing connection with our own inner compass. The Stoics had a powerful metaphor for authentic living that can guide us through these challenging moments. They spoke about being like a red thread woven into a garment, distinctive, visible, and unapologetically different from the surrounding fabric. This image suggests that authenticity isn't about being contrarian or difficult for its own sake, but about maintaining your essential character even when it makes you stand out from the crowd. Epictetus, who experienced the ultimate test of maintaining personal integrity while living as a slave, taught that our freedom lies not in our external circumstances, but in our refusal to let those circumstances change who we fundamentally are. He observed that while others may control our physical conditions, our career opportunities, or our social standing, they cannot force us to betray our own values and principles unless we choose to cooperate with that betrayal. This teaching becomes especially relevant when we consider how modern workplace culture often rewards conformity over authenticity. You might find yourself in meetings where everyone nods along with decisions you privately disagree with, or social situations where expressing your genuine thoughts would create uncomfortable tension. The easy choice in these moments is to blend in, to say what others want to hear, to present a version of yourself that's been carefully edited for maximum acceptability. But the Stoics understood something crucial about this seemingly safer path. When we consistently choose conformity over authenticity, we don't just lose touch with others, we lose touch with ourselves. Seneca wrote about this phenomenon, observing that people who spend their lives trying to be what others want them to be eventually forget who they actually are underneath all those layers of performance and accommodation. The practice of staying true to yourself requires developing what we might call authentic courage, the willingness to be disliked, misunderstood, or even rejected for being genuinely yourself rather than accepted for being someone you're not. This doesn't mean being unnecessarily confrontational or refusing to collaborate with others. Instead, it means developing the inner strength to express your authentic thoughts, values, and perspectives even when doing so feels risky. Consider how this might play out in that job interview scenario. Rather than immediately trying to convince the interviewer that you can become whatever they want you to be, authentic courage would involve having an honest conversation about what you bring to the role and whether there's genuine alignment between your values and the organization's culture. This approach might mean you don't get every job you interview for, but it ensures that the positions you do accept will be ones where you can thrive as your authentic self. The Stoics also recognized that staying true to yourself becomes easier when you develop a clear understanding of your core principles and values. Marcus Aurelius spent considerable time in self-reflection, regularly examining his motivations, his reactions to various situations, and his commitment to virtue. This practice of self-knowledge created a stable foundation that external pressures couldn't easily shake. One practical exercise the Stoics might recommend involves regular self-examination. At the end of each day, you might ask yourself, in what moments today did I compromise my authenticity to avoid discomfort? When did I present a version of myself that felt genuine and aligned with my values? What would I do differently tomorrow to stay more true to who I am? This practice of authentic living also requires accepting that some people won't appreciate or understand your genuine self, and that's perfectly acceptable. The Stoics taught that trying to please everyone is not only impossible but actually harmful to your character development. When you spend your energy trying to be all things to all people, you develop neither deep relationships with others nor a strong relationship with yourself. Ultimately, the courage to stay true to yourself when the world demands conformity is about recognizing that your authenticity is not a problem to be solved but a gift to be offered. The Stoics believed that when we have the courage to be genuinely ourselves, we give others permission to do the same, creating more honest and meaningful connections in every area of our lives. 3. Make bold decisions fast and move forward confidently. You're staring at your laptop screen at 11:47 p.m., scrolling through the same email for the 15th time tonight. It's an opportunity that arrived unexpectedly, a chance to lead a project that could significantly advance your career, but it would require relocating to a different city within 6 weeks. You've been weighing the pros and cons for days now, creating elaborate spreadsheets of potential outcomes, calling friends and family for advice, researching everything from housing costs to school districts. Meanwhile, the deadline for your response is tomorrow morning, and you're no closer to a decision than you were when the offer first arrived. This scenario illustrates one of the most paralyzing challenges of modern life: the belief that if we just gather enough information, analyze enough variables, and consider enough possibilities, we can somehow guarantee the perfect outcome for every decision we make. The ancient Stoics understood something we've largely forgotten in our data-driven age: that the pursuit of perfect information often becomes the enemy of good decision-making, and that the ability to decide quickly and act decisively is itself a crucial skill for living well. Marcus Aurelius, who faced life and death decisions daily as Emperor of Rome, wrote extensively about the importance of decisive action. He observed that while we cannot control the outcomes of our decisions, we have complete control over our decision-making process itself. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present," meaning that we should base our decisions on current reality rather than endless speculation about future possibilities that may never materialize. The emperor understood this principle through direct experience. When plague struck the Roman Empire, he didn't have the luxury of months to debate response strategies. When barbarian tribes threatened the borders, immediate action was required. Through these experiences, he learned that delayed decisions often become far more costly than imperfect decisions made promptly. This wisdom wasn't theoretical for Marcus Aurelius. It was forged through the practical demands of leadership under pressure. The Stoics had a powerful story that illustrates this principle perfectly. A Spartan general was marching through Greece, and as his army approached each territory, he would send messengers ahead with a simple question: "Friend or foe?" Most kingdoms immediately responded with "friend," understanding that hesitation could be interpreted as hostility. But one king kept asking for more time to deliberate. He wanted to study the political implications, consult with advisors, and carefully weigh all possible consequences before committing to an answer. The Spartan general's response was swift and instructive. "Let him keep thinking about it. We'll keep marching." By the time the indecisive king finally made up his mind, the army had moved on, treating his territory as hostile simply because he couldn't decide quickly enough to be treated as friendly. This story reveals a crucial truth about decision-making. Sometimes the cost of not deciding is far greater than the risk of making an imperfect decision. What made this story particularly meaningful to the Stoics was how it demonstrated that life itself rarely waits for our comfort with uncertainty. Opportunities have their own timelines, and our relationship with time becomes a crucial factor in how we navigate important choices. The indecisive king wasn't necessarily wrong in his analysis. Perhaps he genuinely needed to consider complex political ramifications. But his inability to work within the constraints of real-time decision-making ultimately rendered his careful deliberation meaningless. Seneca, who managed vast business enterprises while maintaining his philosophical practice, understood the practical implications of this principle from a different angle. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." This insight suggests that our reluctance to make decisions often stems from our difficulty accepting that choosing one path necessarily means not choosing others. We get trapped in what modern psychology calls analysis paralysis because we're trying to avoid the natural losses that come with any significant choice. Seneca's business background gave him unique insight into how delayed decision-making affects not just the decision-maker but entire networks of people who depend on those choices. When a merchant delays deciding whether to send ships to a particular port, the delay affects traders, suppliers, dock workers, and ultimately consumers in distant markets. This broader perspective helped him understand that decisive action is often an act of service to others, not just personal efficiency. The Stoic approach to decision-making involves what we might call bounded deliberation. This means setting clear limits on how much time and energy we'll invest in analyzing a decision before we commit to action. Epictetus taught that we should distinguish between decisions that require careful thought and those that can be made quickly based on our established principles and values. For example, decisions that align clearly with virtue, honesty, justice, courage, and wisdom can often be made immediately. If you're asked to participate in something that compromises your integrity, you don't need a detailed analysis to know your answer. If you're presented with an opportunity to help someone in need, your response can be swift and certain. The Stoics believed that when our values are clear, many decisions become straightforward. However, for more complex choices like the career opportunity scenario, the Stoic approach involves a structured process. First, identify what aspects of the decision are within your control and which are not. You can control whether you accept the offer, how you prepare for the transition, and how you approach the new role. You cannot control whether the project will be successful, whether you'll love the new city, or whether other opportunities might arise if you stay in your current position. This distinction between controllable and uncontrollable factors serves as a powerful filter for decision-making. Instead of spending mental energy worrying about variables beyond your influence, you can focus your analytical resources on the elements where your choices actually matter. This focused approach naturally speeds up the decision-making process while improving its quality. Next, consider the decision through the lens of virtue. Which choice better aligns with your commitment to excellence, integrity, justice, and courage? Often, the decision that feels slightly more challenging or requires more growth is the one that serves your character development better in the long run. The Stoics viewed every significant decision as an opportunity for character building, which adds another dimension to how we evaluate our options. The Stoics also taught the importance of accepting uncertainty as a fundamental aspect of life. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself that he could not predict or control future outcomes, so his decisions had to be based on present reality and his commitment to virtue rather than attempts to guarantee specific results. This acceptance of uncertainty actually liberates us to make decisions more quickly, because we're no longer trying to achieve the impossible goal of eliminating all risk. Once you've made your decision using this framework, the Stoic practice involves complete commitment to that choice. This doesn't mean blind stubbornness. If new information emerges that fundamentally changes the situation, you can adjust course. But it does mean avoiding the exhausting habit of constantly second-guessing yourself or wondering whether you should have chosen differently. The practical application of this Stoic wisdom starts with recognizing when you're falling into the trap of endless deliberation. Set specific deadlines for decisions and stick to them. Practice making smaller decisions quickly to build your confidence in your decision-making abilities. Most importantly, remember that the goal isn't to make perfect decisions, but to make good decisions decisively and then commit fully to making them work. 4. Answer your life's calling despite what others think. You're sitting in your childhood bedroom at your parents' house during the holidays, and the conversation at dinner has taken that familiar turn. Your aunt leans forward with concern written across her face and asks, "So when are you going to get serious about finding a real career? You've been working as a freelance graphic designer for 2 years now, building a client base and developing skills that genuinely excite you. But to your family, it still looks like you're just postponing adulthood." The pressure in the room is palpable as everyone waits for your response. and you can feel that old familiar weight settling on your shoulders, the weight of other people's expectations about who you should be and what your life should look like. This scenario captures one of the most profound challenges we face in living authentically: the courage to pursue our genuine calling even when the people we love most don't understand or approve of our choices. The ancient Stoics understood the struggle intimately, and their teachings offer powerful guidance for navigating the tension between following our authentic path and managing the disappointment or concern of others. The story of Florence Nightingale provides a striking example of this principle in action. At 16 years old, she experienced what she later described as her calling: a clear sense that she was meant to serve others through nursing. But this calling came with a significant problem. In Victorian England, nursing was considered such a disreputable profession that her parents would have preferred she become a prostitute rather than work in a hospital. The social stigma was so intense that she spent 8 years suppressing her calling, trying to convince herself that she could find fulfillment in the conventional path her family expected. When the calling returned at 24, it came with even greater clarity and urgency. But rather than immediately pursuing her purpose, Nightingale spent another 18 years battling against the expectations of others. She continued to delay, hoping that somehow the path would become easier or that her family's attitude would change. It wasn't until she was 42 years old that she finally found the courage to answer her calling decisively, and within months of that decision, she was revolutionizing medical care in military hospitals during the Crimean War. The Stoics would have recognized Nightingale's struggle as a classic example of what happens when we allow external opinions to override our internal wisdom. Epictetus, who understood oppression firsthand from his years as a slave, taught that true freedom comes not from external circumstances but from our willingness to follow our nature regardless of what others think about our choices. He wrote, "No one can harm you without your permission." This teaching becomes particularly relevant when we consider how family and social expectations can create a form of internal prison. When Nightingale delayed pursuing nursing because of her parents' disapproval, she wasn't protecting them from disappointment. She was collaborating with a system that kept her from becoming who she was meant to be. The Stoics understood that this kind of self-betrayal ultimately serves no one well, because when we suppress our authentic gifts and calling, we deprive the world of our unique contribution. Marcus Aurelius, despite being born into circumstances that predetermined much of his life path, wrote extensively about the importance of aligning our actions with our essential nature. He observed that every person has a particular role to play in the larger human community, and that discovering and fulfilling that role is both a personal responsibility and a service to others. From the Stoic perspective, pursuing your calling isn't selfish. It's an act of courage that benefits everyone. The Emperor's insight here is particularly profound when we consider how often people abandon their authentic path out of a misguided attempt to avoid causing others discomfort. In the dinner table scenario, you might choose to abandon your freelance design work and pursue a more conventional career path to ease your family's anxiety. But this choice, while temporarily reducing tension, ultimately deprives your family of the opportunity to see you flourish in your authentic work, and it deprives the world of whatever unique creative contributions you might make. Seneca, who navigated complex political relationships while maintaining his philosophical integrity, understood that following your calling often requires developing what we might call loving firmness with the people in your life. This means maintaining deep care and respect for others while refusing to let their fears or expectations override your authentic direction. He taught that we can acknowledge others' concerns without being controlled by them. One of the most challenging aspects of answering your calling despite others' opinions is learning to distinguish between legitimate feedback and projection. Sometimes family members express concern because they genuinely see potential problems you haven't considered. Other times, their resistance comes from their own unfulfilled dreams or their fear of what your success might say about their own choices. The Stoics would encourage you to listen respectfully to all feedback while maintaining final authority over your own life decisions. The practical application of this Stoic wisdom involves several key practices. First, develop clear communication about your values and goals. Instead of being defensive about your choices, explain the positive vision that drives your decisions. Help others understand not just what you're doing, but why it matters to you and how it aligns with your deepest values. Second, accept that some people may never fully understand or support your authentic path, and that this doesn't make them bad people or invalidate your choices. The Stoics taught that we cannot control others' opinions, only our response to those opinions. This acceptance can actually free you to maintain loving relationships with people who disagree with your life choices. Third, remember that following your calling often requires patience and persistence. Nightingale's 18-year delay reminds us that the courage to pursue our authentic path isn't always immediate. Sometimes we need time to develop the inner strength and practical skills necessary to succeed on our chosen path. Finally, trust that when you have the courage to pursue your authentic calling, you give others permission to do the same. Your willingness to follow your genuine path, despite others' concerns, can inspire family members and friends to reconsider their own relationship with authenticity and courage. Ultimately, the Stoics believe that answering your life's calling despite what others think isn't just about personal fulfillment. It's about contributing your unique gifts to the world in the way that only you can. 5. Find your heroic moment in ordinary daily life. You're walking out of the grocery store on a typical Thursday evening, juggling bags while checking your phone for the latest work emails, when you notice an elderly man struggling to load heavy bags into his car. His hands are shaking slightly, and he's clearly having difficulty lifting the heavier items. You pause for a moment, calculating how much this detour might delay your evening routine. You still need to get home, make dinner, help your kids with homework, and prepare for tomorrow's early meeting. The easier choice would be to keep walking, maybe offer a sympathetic smile as you pass by. After all, someone else will probably help him, right? This moment, right here in this grocery store parking lot, represents something the ancient Stoics understood about heroism that we've largely forgotten in our modern world. We've been conditioned to think that heroic opportunities are rare, dramatic events that happen to other people in extraordinary circumstances. We imagine heroism as soldiers charging into battle, firefighters rushing into burning buildings, or activists leading massive social movements. While these examples certainly represent courage in action, the Stoics taught something far more empowering. Heroic opportunities surround us every single day, hidden within the seemingly ordinary moments of our regular lives. Marcus Aurelius, writing from his military campaigns along the Danube frontier, understood this principle through direct experience. While history remembers him for his leadership during wars and plagues, his personal writings reveal that he found equal meaning in small daily acts of virtue. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I have to go to work as a human being.' This perspective transforms every interaction into an opportunity for virtue, every ordinary day into a chance for heroic living. The emperor's insight here challenges our modern assumption that we need to wait for obviously significant moments to make a meaningful difference. In that grocery store scenario, helping the elderly man load his groceries might seem like a small gesture, hardly worthy of the word heroic. But the Stoics would argue that this perspective misses the profound truth about how character is actually built and how positive change spreads through communities. Consider what happens when you choose to help in that moment. First, you practice the virtue of compassion in action, strengthening your own capacity for future acts of service. Second, you provide genuine assistance to someone who needs it, potentially making the difference between his successful completion of an essential task and a struggle that could affect his health or independence. Third, you model for any observers, including your own children if they're with you, what it looks like to prioritize human connection over personal convenience. But perhaps most importantly, you participate in what the Stoics understood as the interconnected web of human community. Epictetus taught that we are all part of a larger whole, like organs in a body or actors in a play, and that our individual actions ripple outward in ways we rarely see or fully understand. The elderly man you help today might be encouraged by your kindness to offer assistance to someone else tomorrow. The parent watching from across the parking lot might be inspired to have a conversation with their children about looking for opportunities to help others. This understanding of heroic living becomes even more powerful when we consider how the Stoics viewed moral opportunity in their own historical context. During Marcus Aurelius's reign, Rome faced devastating plagues, barbarian invasions, and internal political turmoil. Yet rather than seeing these crises as unique historical circumstances that called for extraordinary responses, the emperor approached them as variations of the same fundamental challenge that every human faces: how to respond to difficulty with virtue and wisdom. Seneca, writing during the politically dangerous reign of Nero, understood that waiting for obviously heroic circumstances often meant missing the real opportunities for courage and service that surrounded him daily. He observed that people in every era tend to imagine that previous generations faced clearer moral choices and more obvious opportunities for heroism, while their own time seems mundane or morally ambiguous. This tendency reveals something crucial about human psychology. We often fail to recognize the heroic potential in our ordinary circumstances because we're comparing them to idealized versions of other people's extraordinary moments. But the Stoics taught that this comparison is both inaccurate and paralyzing. Every generation faces its own forms of suffering, injustice, and moral challenge. Every individual encounters daily opportunities to choose virtue over convenience, service over selfishness, courage over comfort. The practical application of this Stoic insight starts with developing what we might call heroic awareness, the ability to recognize moral opportunities in everyday situations. This means paying attention to moments when someone around you could benefit from assistance, when a situation calls for someone to speak up for what's right, and when a small act of kindness could make a significant difference in someone's day. Sometimes these opportunities involve direct service, like helping the man with his groceries. Other times, they involve moral courage, like speaking up when someone makes a discriminatory comment in your workplace. Sometimes they require emotional generosity, like taking time to really listen when a friend is struggling with a difficult decision. The common thread isn't the dramatic nature of the action, but the choice to prioritize virtue and service over personal comfort or convenience. The Stoics also understood that heroic living requires us to reframe our understanding of significance itself. Instead of measuring the value of our actions by their visibility or recognition, we learn to find meaning in their alignment with virtue and their positive impact on others, regardless of whether anyone notices or appreciates our efforts. Moreover, this approach to heroic living creates a positive feedback loop in our character development. Each time we choose to help, to speak up, to serve, or to act with courage in small situations, we strengthen our capacity for virtue in larger ones. The person who regularly practices kindness in grocery store parking lots is more likely to respond with compassion during genuine emergencies. The individual who speaks up against unfairness in everyday situations builds the moral muscle necessary for larger acts of courage when they're needed. Ultimately, the Stoic understanding of heroic living liberates us from the paralyzing belief that we need to wait for extraordinary circumstances to live meaningfully. Every ordinary day presents multiple opportunities to practice virtue, serve others, and contribute positively to the human community around us. 6. Stand strong alone until others join your cause. You're sitting in a conference room watching your company's leadership team discuss a new policy that you know will harm the very customers you've spent years building relationships with. The proposed changes will increase profits in the short term, but will inevitably damage trust and create long-term problems for client retention. As the discussion continues around the table, you realize that you're the only person in the room who seems concerned about these implications. Your colleagues are nodding along, some even adding supportive comments about the potential revenue benefits. The moment arrives when your manager asks if anyone has concerns or questions, and suddenly every eye in the room is on you. This scenario captures one of the most challenging aspects of principled living: the willingness to stand alone for what you believe is right, even when that stance makes you unpopular, isolated, or professionally vulnerable. The ancient Stoics understood that moral leadership often begins with the courage of one individual who chooses to speak truth in situations where everyone else has chosen the comfort of conformity or silence. The historical record reveals something striking about moral courage that challenges our romantic notions of how positive change happens. During World War II, when Nazi Germany occupied France, only about 5% of the French population actively participated in the resistance movement. This means that 95% of the population, faced with one of history's clearest moral challenges, chose either active collaboration or passive acceptance rather than resistance. This statistic isn't meant to judge those who made different choices under impossible circumstances, but rather to illustrate how rare moral courage actually is, even in situations where right and wrong seem obvious in retrospect. Marcus Aurelius understood this phenomenon from his position as emperor, where he regularly faced situations requiring him to make unpopular decisions based on principle rather than political convenience. He wrote, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself." This insight reveals something crucial about moral leadership. It requires developing the inner strength to act according to your principles regardless of whether others support, understand, or even notice your choices. The emperor's experience taught him that standing alone for principle isn't just about the immediate situation at hand. It's about maintaining your integrity over the long term and potentially inspiring others to find their own courage. When you speak up in that conference room about the policy's potential harm to customers, you're not just addressing a business decision. You're demonstrating that it's possible to prioritize long-term value over short-term gain, that someone in the organization still cares about the client's welfare, and that principled dissent is both possible and necessary. Epictetus, who understood isolation and powerlessness from his years as a slave, taught that our capacity to stand alone for what's right comes from recognizing what truly belongs to us versus what depends on others. He observed that while others control our external circumstances, our job security, our social standing, our reputation among colleagues, they cannot control our character or our commitment to virtue unless we choose to surrender that control. This teaching becomes particularly relevant in situations like the conference room scenario. You cannot control whether your colleagues will support your position, whether your manager will appreciate your concerns, or whether speaking up will help or harm your career prospects. But you have complete control over whether you act according to your principles or allow fear of consequences to override your moral judgment. The story of Martin Luther King Jr. provides a powerful illustration of how standing alone can eventually rally others to a cause. During his lifetime, King was deeply unpopular among both white and black Americans. Polls from the 1960s show that the majority of Americans viewed him unfavorably, seeing his methods as too disruptive and his message as too challenging to the status quo. Even within the civil rights movement, many leaders disagreed with his approach and criticized his strategies. Yet King understood something profound about moral leadership that sustained him through years of isolation and criticism. When asked about the loneliness of his position, he replied that he knew one day that would cease to be so. This response reveals the essential mindset of principled leadership, the willingness to endure temporary isolation in service of long-term change, trusting that courage can eventually inspire others to join you. Seneca, who navigated the dangerous political environment of imperial Rome, understood that standing alone for principle often requires what we might call strategic patience. This doesn't mean compromising your values or waiting for perfect conditions to act courageously. Instead, it means recognizing that meaningful change often happens gradually, beginning with one person's willingness to model a different way of thinking or acting. In the business context, your principled stand in that conference room might not immediately change the policy decision, but it accomplishes several important things. It ensures that the potential problems are officially on record. It demonstrates to other employees that dissent is possible, and it maintains your own integrity even when doing so feels risky or uncomfortable. The Stoics also taught that standing alone for principle requires accepting that you might face genuine consequences for your courage. Speaking up about questionable business practices might indeed affect your career advancement or workplace relationships. The Stoic response to this reality isn't denial or wishful thinking, but rather a clear-eyed assessment of what matters most to you in the long term. This assessment involves asking yourself, can I live with myself if I remain silent when I know better? What kind of person do I want to be when I face moral challenges? Am I willing to prioritize my character development over my immediate comfort or advancement? These questions help clarify whether the potential costs of speaking up are greater than the certain cost of compromising your principles. The practical application of this Stoic wisdom involves developing what we might call principled resilience, the ability to maintain your values even when others don't share or support them. This starts with cultivating a strong sense of your own moral foundation, independent of external validation or approval. Ultimately, the Stoics believed that one person's courage to stand alone can create a ripple effect that eventually transforms entire communities and organizations. Your willingness to speak up in that conference room might inspire a colleague to voice their own concerns next time, or encourage someone else to prioritize customer welfare in their own decision-making. 7. Build your courage muscle with small daily victories. You're standing in line at the coffee shop you visit every morning, and the barista accidentally gives you too much change, a $20 bill instead of a 10. She's clearly frazzled, dealing with the morning rush while training a new employee, and she doesn't notice her mistake as she turns to help the next customer. You look down at the extra $10 in your hand, and your mind immediately starts calculating. This could cover your lunch today or help with gas money, and honestly, big coffee chains make plenty of profit anyway. The rational part of your brain knows exactly what you should do. But there's that familiar hesitation, that moment where doing the right thing feels unnecessarily complicated compared to just pocketing the money and walking away. This seemingly minor moment represents something the ancient Stoics understood with remarkable clarity. Courage isn't built through grand gestures or dramatic moments of heroism, but through the accumulation of small, daily choices that either strengthen or weaken our character. Every time we face a decision between the easy path and the right path, we're either building our capacity for virtue or allowing it to atrophy through neglect. Marcus Aurelius, despite commanding legions and governing an empire, wrote extensively about these small moments of moral choice. In his personal journal, he reflected on everyday decisions about honesty, patience, kindness, and integrity with the same seriousness that he applied to matters of state. He understood that the emperor who could be trusted with the welfare of millions was the same man who returned extra change to harried baristas, who spoke truthfully in small conversations, and who kept his word in minor commitments. The emperor's insight here reveals something profound about character development that modern psychology has confirmed. Our brains are constantly forming neural pathways based on our repeated behaviors. Every time you choose honesty in a small situation, you're literally strengthening the neural connections that make honest behavior more automatic in larger situations. Conversely, every time you choose the convenient lie or the small compromise, you're making it slightly easier to choose dishonesty when the stakes are higher. This understanding transforms how we view those mundane moments of moral choice that occur throughout our day. The decision about the coffee shop change isn't just about $10. It's about who you're becoming through your choices. It's about whether you're building the kind of character that naturally defaults to integrity or the kind that looks for justifications to avoid doing what's right. Epictetus, who understood the importance of daily practice from his philosophical training, taught that virtue is like any other skill. It requires consistent practice to develop and maintain. He observed that we wouldn't expect to become skilled musicians by occasionally picking up an instrument, or competent athletes by exercising only when we feel motivated. Similarly, we cannot expect to develop moral courage by waiting for obviously significant moments to practice virtue. The former slave's teaching here illuminates why so many people struggle with courage in important situations. They've spent years avoiding the small opportunities to practice honesty, integrity, and principled action. So when a situation arises that genuinely requires courage, they lack the moral muscle memory to respond effectively. It's like expecting to run a marathon when you haven't been training regularly. The physical and mental resources simply aren't available when you need them most. Consider how this principle might apply beyond the coffee shop scenario. Throughout your typical day, you encounter numerous opportunities to practice small acts of courage. Speaking up when someone makes an inappropriate comment in a meeting, admitting when you've made a mistake rather than hoping no one notices, choosing to have a difficult but necessary conversation with a family member, returning a call you've been avoiding because the topic feels uncomfortable. Each of these moments presents what we might call a courage repetition, a chance to strengthen your capacity for principled action. When you speak up about the inappropriate comment, you're not just addressing that specific situation. You're building your ability to advocate for what's right in more challenging circumstances. When you admit your mistake proactively, you're developing the habit of accountability that serves you well when larger errors occur. Seneca, who balanced philosophical practice with demanding business and political responsibilities, understood that this approach to character development requires what we might call intentional awareness. This means paying attention to the moral dimensions of everyday choices rather than operating on autopilot or assuming that small decisions don't matter. The Roman philosopher developed a practice of evening reflection where he would review the day's choices, noting moments when he had acted according to his principles and times when he had chosen convenience over virtue. This wasn't self-flagellation or perfectionist thinking, but rather the kind of honest self-assessment that athletes use to improve their performance. By tracking patterns in his moral choices, Seneca could identify areas where he needed to focus more attention and celebrate progress in areas where his character was strengthening. This practice of intentional reflection can transform how you approach those small daily decisions. Instead of viewing the coffee shop scenario as an isolated choice about money, you begin to see it as part of a larger pattern of character development. You ask yourself, am I becoming more honest or more willing to rationalize small compromises? Am I developing the habit of doing right even when no one would know if I chose differently? The Stoics also understood that building courage through small victories creates what modern psychology calls self-efficacy, confidence in your ability to handle challenging situations effectively. When you consistently choose integrity in low-stakes situations, you develop trust in your own character that serves you well when facing more significant challenges. Moreover, this approach to courage development creates positive momentum in your life. Each small victory makes the next right choice slightly easier, building an upward spiral of character growth. The person who returns the extra change at the coffee shop is more likely to speak up about ethical concerns at work, more likely to have honest conversations in relationships, and more likely to take principled stands when they matter most. The practical application of this Stoic wisdom involves developing what we might call micro-courage awareness. Start noticing the small moments throughout your day when you have opportunities to practice honesty, integrity, kindness, or other virtues. Treat these moments as training opportunities rather than insignificant choices. Your daily courage practice starts now. Throughout our journey together today, we've explored 7 powerful ways that ancient Stoic wisdom can help you build unshakable courage in your modern life. From choosing principle over comfort in daily decisions, to maintaining your authentic self when the world demands conformity, to making bold choices quickly and moving forward with confidence. Each lesson builds upon the others to create a comprehensive approach to courageous living. The story that emerges from these teachings reveals something profound about human potential. You don't need to wait for extraordinary circumstances to live heroically. The elderly man struggling with his groceries, the inappropriate comment in the conference room, the extra change at the coffee shop. These ordinary moments are where your character is actually forged. They're where you discover whether you're becoming the kind of person who can be trusted with larger challenges and greater opportunities for positive impact. What makes the Stoic approach so powerful is how it transforms your entire relationship with fear and uncertainty. Instead of seeing difficult situations as problems to be avoided, you begin to recognize them as training opportunities. Every moment that calls for courage becomes a chance to strengthen the very qualities that make life meaningful. Integrity, authenticity, principled action, and service to something greater than yourself. The ancient philosophers understood that courage isn't a personality trait you either have or lack. It's a skill you develop through practice. Marcus Aurelius didn't become a great leader because he was naturally fearless. He became great because he consistently chose virtue over convenience, principle over popularity, and service over self-interest. Epictetus didn't develop unshakable inner strength because he avoided hardship. He built that strength by choosing dignity and integrity even under the most challenging circumstances. Your courage journey begins with a simple recognition. Every single day presents you with multiple opportunities to practice the principles we've discussed. You can choose courage over fear in your next difficult conversation. You can maintain authenticity in tomorrow's challenging social situation. You can make that important decision you've been postponing and move forward with confidence. You can answer your life's calling despite others' concerns, find heroic moments in ordinary circumstances, and stand strong for your principles even when you feel alone. Remember that building courage is like building physical strength. It happens gradually through consistent practice, and the results compound over time. The small act of integrity you choose today makes the larger act of courage easier next month. The principled stand you take in a minor situation prepares you for the major challenges that will inevitably come. Most importantly, remember that your courage has ripple effects beyond your own life. When you have the strength to be authentically yourself, you give others permission to do the same. When you speak up for what's right, you make it easier for the next person to find their voice. When you pursue your genuine calling despite others' concerns, you inspire someone else to follow their authentic path. If this exploration of Stoic courage has resonated with you, I encourage you to subscribe to the Stoic Vivu channel, where we regularly dive deep into ancient wisdom for modern living. Hit that like button if these insights have helped you think differently about courage and character development. Share this video with someone who might benefit from discovering their own capacity for daily heroism. Your courageous life is waiting for you to claim it, one small daily choice at a time.